We're at a second. First, welcome. This is a huge crowd. We couldn't be more pleased to have you all here today. But we wouldn't be here today really without my team. And so I want to introduce them first. Chelsea and Jackie, where's Jackie at? And Lynette. The three of those really put all this together, right? I get to stand up here and get all the glory. They did all the hard work and got everything set up and got the monitors going here shortly. But again, if I give them a round of applause and have everything happen, that would be great. And then, where's Jeff at, my IT guy? There he is, right? He's still working, right? Again, without Jeff, you guys don't hear me. We don't have the video here. We certainly don't have the simulcast next door. So if we give him a round of applause, that would be great as well. My volunteers from where are we from? The grazing barn. Sarah and Karen, right? And then Jennifer Faddis is helping out. Katie and Tim were out the door over there. My wife Laura. Again, I appreciate all your help that you guys have for today. So give them a round of applause. And the co-sponsors of the event, the RCU and Frank Miller Lumber, without them and their support, we wouldn't have this as well. So if we can give them a round of applause. And then we're trying to get the sponsors on the big screen here, but I'll go through them really quickly here. Our platinum sponsor is Silvertown Mint in the back there. Appreciate all their support there. The gold is Reed Health. I know it's Jason here and his team. Again, they were the gold sponsors. Our silver sponsors. As the City of Union City, and appreciate everything that the City of Union City does for Frank Miller Lumber and really for Randolph County. And then we have these little welcome boxes, right? And they have all the sponsors on there. So the gold sponsors, I'll just kind of read them here. Everhart Hospice, if they're here, appreciate that. First Merchants, Horton. Marketplace Chaplains, the Randolph County YMCA, McGowan Brabender, Just Lane, Ohio Valley Gas, Ardagh, Carter. And then again, Tim put these together for us from Imaginations, and again, these are great little boxes. If you open them up, you have like a little Live2Lead notebook in there. And for us old schoolers, right, for this group over here, inside you got some little Post-its, right? I'm not sure that these guys even know what Post-its are, but some of us have that, right? So again, thank all our sponsors, and without them, really, we don't have this as well. So appreciate all your financial support. You know, Lynette asked me why I brought the Live2Lead to Randolph County. And I wrote up a little article in their newsletter, but really, when I look at that, it's really important for me and why I'm so passionate about teaching leadership, right? For me, it started at an early age, right? Because my dad was my hero. Even though he started me working when I was 6. My wife's really grateful, though, that he started me at 6, because that's when I met her, right? Now, I would say most days she's grateful, right? There's probably a few, not so much, right? But after 35 years of marriage, right, you're not going to have every day be a glorious day, right? And as Maxwell's book says, sometimes you win, sometimes you learn. And we've done a lot of learning over the last 35 years, right? So anyways, my dad was my hero. And really, you know, my dad brought joy to the world, right? But you had to know him to really appreciate what he did. And so what I wanted to do to honor him is take it and be it more impactful, right? And so how do you be more impactful by bringing joy? And it's really talking to people about influence, right? How do I influence people, right? And as Maxwell will tell you, influence is leadership, and leadership is influence, pure and simple. So how can I positively influence people, right? By teaching them how to positively influence other people. So I've been researching and really studying leadership for the last 20 years. And again, I studied all of them, you know, Simon Sinek, Zig Ziglar, obviously John Maxwell, and all the host of the other ones. But really, in my mind, Maxwell is a leadership guru, right? He's written over 100 books on leadership. I think he's taught leadership in almost every country in the world. So really, in 2017, I had the opportunity to go to Atlanta to see this live. And I tell everybody, you need to have this on your bucket list. You need to go to Atlanta. You need to sit down there and you need to be in that room with that audience, right? And if you're going to pay the plane ticket and to get in there, you might as well do the VIP experience. Because in 2017, I got to have breakfast with John Maxwell and Dave Ramsey. Can't get any better than that. And then the following year, I had breakfast with John Maxwell and Carly Fiorini, all right, another excellent leader. In 2019, I decided that I was going to join the Maxwell leadership team and became a team member, bought the mentorship, and actually brought it here to Randolph County, the simulcast. So now we're in year 4, right? And this is going to be the best one yet. And what I'll tell everybody, if you're not going to be the best one yet, don't do it. All right, no matter what you do, if you're not going to give your best, just don't do it. But again, we have a great day ahead of us. Here shortly, we're going to have a generational panel discussion. All right, and it's going to look like it's kind of staged because one of the speakers, Tim Elmore, just wrote a book on that. But this really is just coincidental because after last Live to Lead, I started planning this, how we're going to have this panel. So Tim took all my notes and he wrote a book on it, and he's going to get all the credit for it. But it was my idea, talking about generational diversity. And really, you think about generational diversity. And really, it started for me, I get really tired of really all the generations picking on the other generations. My generation here, we'll talk about the younger generation, right? And we say, oh, they're lazy, or they're always on their phone, or always doing this. But it's always interesting, right? Because all of a sudden, like, wait, I got a text, it's from work. But that doesn't count, right? Because that's work. They're just playing on it, they're doing TikTok stuff. And then you have the younger generation. Well, I just heard a study that 85% of them want to start their own business, right? They want to be entrepreneurs and start their own business. And that's really cool. But if we think about that, the reason they want to start their own business, because they don't want to work for us. They just don't. Because I don't think that we respected them enough. And these guys here, they don't really trust anybody, right? That's kind of their generation, right? They want proof of everything. And so really what I thought today, instead of having that divide, right, is how can we get this panel here to have open discussions on what each of our strengths are? Because I look at this, we can learn from anybody. I got a quick story to tell you. My daughter had a little health issue, and she was in the ICU for a little bit here a couple weeks ago. But me and my mom had to go pick up our grandson at the preschool. And so, his dad was telling us, hey, you got to do this, and then there's a kiosk, and you got to put in a code, and you got to do all this other stuff to check him out. And all I heard was the code, right? And I know the code. I assumed that someone was going to be there to check us out. We go into the school, there's no one up front. I start to get a little nervous. He's out there, we get him. I'm like, hang on, his name's Jex. I'm like, hang on, Jex. Grandpa's got to figure out how to check you out here. Didn't miss a beat, went over there to the kiosk, right? Typed in some stuff, typed in the 4-digit code, right? Realized that he went too fast and missed the last digit. Hit the backspace key, right? Hit the right digit in, hit a few more things, and he's like, okay, we're ready to go. Now, we all should be terrified that a 4-year-old can check himself out of preschool, okay? But the simple fact is, there's lots of things that we can learn from a 4-year-old because the world that he's lived in is different than the world that we lived in when we were 4. Right, so again, I talked to his grandma over here, right? She just got an Apple Watch. And I'm like, oh, cool, what does it do? She goes, I don't know, but the cool thing is, I got the app that I can put Minnie on my watch face, and she can tell me time, right? And I put the other app in, and I can find my phone, right? So where's that technology, right? That's what we're using this stuff for. Again, as the kids down there, they're using it for all kinds of things. So again, the whole point is trying to get and understand them from our perspective and vice versa. I do have a great workplace example of that. So we actually have Mason Barker from Winchester, right? Go Falcons, right? There's the Falcons in the room here. There we are. So he's interning for us this year. So he's 18 years old. He's working in our maintenance group. And so again, in our maintenance group, we have, 3 or 4 60-year-olds and a 50 and a 40-year-old, right? So a lot of knowledge there. Mason comes in, and he can weld better than most of them. Probably all of them, but there's a few that really want to put him to the test. So he's actually teaching them welding. And think about this, we have 230 years of experience that we're pouring into this kid over the school year. And again, and he's excited to be there. Our guys are excited to have him because now all of a sudden they got a replacement, right? So they can actually think about retiring. So that's what we're trying to accomplish here today. And I hope that we all come away from this as that we understand that the different generations and how we think, but more importantly is understanding how they think and applying that here. And again, and hopefully, again, that we have all the entrepreneurs that they want to go out and be very successful, but we also need a workforce here as well, and we got to treat them with respect and dignity and understanding and make them feel appreciated to come work for us. So with that, I think we're almost ready. We'll probably be a minute or two early. And I'd like to introduce Bales that's going to moderate our great panel here. So thank you.
Okay. Oh my. Okay, can you hear me there? Do I need to do it up a little bit? Okay, I'm not used to that. So welcome, I'm Bales and was asked to serve as kind of the moderator. I'm super excited about this panel and love, as Steve said, this topic. This topic has gained a lot of interest, both at the practitioner level with the people that you're going to hear from today, and the academic society that's been doing a lot of research on this generational dynamic that we have in our workforce. We actually have 5 generations working in some of our companies. And so I thought before we start, I will tell you, these are in kind of broad ranges, so when I ask you to raise your hand when it's your generation, you're not going to be disclosing your age, okay? You're just going to be closing a range, all right? And so the first generation are the traditionalists. They're also called the silent generation. They're people who are born between 1928 and 1945. I'm not sure if we have anybody. Do we have anybody in that range? Maybe not. So they are the smallest workforce, people in the workforce, but we do have them in the workforce. So that's what makes 5 generations. The next one I think we all know about are the baby boomers, born between 1946 and 1964. Raise your hand if you're a baby boomer. There we go. There's our baby boomers. They, of course, make up a large portion of the U.S. population, and they are, of course, the generation that are getting ready to retire, that we're going to be trying to grab what we call knowledge sharing. And knowledge sharing is that thing we're very concerned about in our workforce when we have multiple generations, along with just the soft side, which is what Steve talked about, which goes along with those cultural gaps. Then Generation X, which is born between 1965 and 1980. Raise your hand if you're a Generation Xer. All right, so good crowd of Generation X. Next is Generation Y. They're also referred to as the millennials. They were born between 1981 and 1996, so some of it, okay. All right, we have a good group of that. There are some sources that say that it's 1981 to 2000. Now, the interesting thing about this generation is they are the first generation that grew up in the age of technology advancements, right? So they are really tech savvy. They're our first group who are tech savvy. Then we have our Generation Z, and they were born between 1997 to 2015. So I know we've got some students, that's amazing. Another source says that it's about 2001 to 2020, and of course this is a group that is just entering the workforce, okay? So that's what makes up our 5 generations that we're going to kind of talk about today. So the beauty, as you saw, if you notice as we raised our hands, that we have that kind of our generations kind of gapped in tables so they won't be next to each other. I'm not sure if that was the thought or what, but so we're going to jump right in and get to hear from each of them, and we'll get going. We will first want to start with a brief intro, very brief, and just say your name and if your title and what organization. If you're a student, just say what grade you're in and what school you go to. So we'll start down with the young folks down there. So take it away, Generation Z.
Hi, I'm K.I.S. Stefan. I'm a senior at Randolph-Summit. My name is Elijah Taylor, and I'm a senior at Monroe Central Junior Senior High School.
My name's Lynette Clark, and I'm the Vice President of Marketing and Strategic Initiatives at Randolph County United.
I'm Jackie Welch. I'm the VP of Community and Business Development at Randolph County United.
I'm Kristen Wygan, and I am the Winchester Community High School P-Tech Work-Based Learning Coordinator and owner of Thrive by Design.
I'm Dora Sedling, Vice President of Human Resources at Frank Miller Lumber.
I'm Paul Faddis, and I'm with Carter Realty.
Steve James, President and CEO of Frank Miller Lumber.
Okay, wonderful. So we're going to jump right into our first question, and we're going to switch it and start with the seasoned folks first, all right? So what do you feel are the strengths and weaknesses of your generation?
Sorry, anybody particular?
No, just your table.
Okay, I'll go first. Coming from the baby boomers, we grew up before computers, born before microwaves, those fun things. And so I think the boomers are a little bit hesitant for change, a little bit hesitant to try technology. As Steve had said, his 4-year-old's checking himself out of daycare. Well, I didn't even get a cell phone after my kids had theirs, and they had to show me how to use it. So we're a little bit hesitant on technology, but we are, I think, a little bit more prone to stay at a job for a long time. We tend to work 30, 40, 50 years. We just retired an employee at Frank Miller Lumber with his 50th anniversary. Been there since he's been 18. So the boomers tend to stay. They're dedicated, they're loyal. Not that the kids are not loyal, but the kids want adventure. They like to try new things. They get bored, and so they want to move on. So I think that's probably one of the biggest ones for me, that I see differences. I don't really call them weaknesses or strengths. It's just different.
I think that's interesting, listening to Doris talk, I guess. I don't know that they're strengths or weaknesses, but maybe characteristics. We're not the baby boomers, we're a little younger, but we probably do stick around jobs longer, but we're not loyal to the death. We're just going to stay there because that was our first job out of high school. So maybe we're the bridge. I mean, we bridge the gap sometimes. Maybe, I don't know. I guess I think every generation has its own strengths and weaknesses, and they can be across the board. So I guess maybe that's part of my generation, is I just see that I bridge the gap. So I don't know.
Yeah, I think same work. We didn't have the technology, so I think we're. And when I say hard work, it doesn't mean that young kids don't work as hard. And as I've told them, you got to work smarter than we do, because we didn't have the technology, and really that's a lot. It's foreign to us, but I think we are hard workers. Some of the things as you grow older, right, you get a little more closed-minded, and you forget things and how things were when you were growing up, right? So I think, for us is to be a little more open-minded. I think that's probably part of our issue, is that we're a little closed-minded and we want things our way.
All right, so we'll move to Generation Y over here. And so what do you think are maybe the strengths, weaknesses, or, as Paul said, characteristics of your generation, the tech generation?
Yeah, I can start. So I think we're very adaptable. So I think back of how technology has come since I was younger till now, and I've learned to use it all. And when new things come out, if I can adapt it and use it for my job and to make ours do better, then I'm going to learn. I think we're also a YouTube generation, where if we don't understand, we're going to go out and figure out how to do it, because technology is always changing. So I think we're very adaptable.
Yeah, I'll piggyback off of that. I agree. I remember before there was internet, and so seeing that transition, I think that's a benefit to us. Now, I'm in the beginning, so I am not a YouTuber, but I get where she says that. So a lot of people do that. So.
Yeah, when I looked up what generation I was in, I was a millennial, and I was disappointed. I was like, oh, I'm one of them, right? So I think the millennials get the bad rap for being lazy and not having a good work ethic, and just wanting handouts. And I think though that stereotypes are stereotypes because they ring true for a lot of people, but I think it's important to take into account, not to go like community, but the people in our community, I think that fall in our generation are hardworking and want to pull people together and are looking at how we can impact others. So I would say don't paint each generation with a broad brush.
When you bring up a good point, the contextual aspect of it, right? So the contextually is your culture, right? You as a personality, right? So if you're a type A personality as a millennial, you're going to be more driven, right? So versus a type B or type D personality. So that's great. That's great. All right. We're going to get to you that we're all anxious, or maybe just me. I am so anxious to hear and super excited about having Generation Z here. One, because I have one that I'm trying to raise and nurture. So you need to help me figure him out. So what do you think are the strengths, weaknesses of your generation, or just the characteristics of your generation?
So I think one of the biggest strengths for our generation is we've started with technology from day one. We have been there and we continue to see everything continue to change, but the changes are small, so we're able to adapt to each and every change that comes with that technology, as they have mentioned before. And then one of the weaknesses is communication, especially face-to-face communication. With technology, we've gotten so used to Zoom, call, text, email, stuff like that, that we lack those skills needed for face-to-face communication.
I'll kind of go off of that. I think that our generation is a little bit more aware of things when it happens, just because we did grow up in a technology time frame and it was kind of already natural to us when we were little. So I think it's easier for us to become aware of different things that happen. But at the same time, kind of like what they said down there, it's harder for us to kind of stay in one place because we do want to try new things and we are a little bit all over the place sometimes. But that's not always a bad thing, but I feel like it's definitely good to have a time where we can just sit and be there for a while. We don't have to necessarily always change. We can stay there and learn more as time goes on.
Okay, so if there's,
Can I just-
yeah, go ahead.
You know, and we have to realize that as employers, I mean, if you just heard anything right there, they want to try new things, right? And it's okay. So for us, we have to have the mindset that we're going to train them, and some of them are going to leave and try new things. And we don't like that, right? As employers, are like, no, I want to train them, I want them to stay. And that's just not going to happen. And so we have to change our mindset to make sure that we have that and we have a training process that's going to go along with that. So again, I really love that point.
Yeah, and I was just going to say, if there's anybody in this room that was concerned about Generation Z and them taking care of us when we're retired, if you just heard those comments, I think we're going to be well taken care of. You talk about articulate, very impressive, great job. So the next question is, we're going to talk about, I think you mentioned a little bit about the stereotypes. And so the next question is, what kind of prevalent stigma of your generation frustrates you the most? So we will start with the millennials. We'll let you guys kick this one off. So kind of what's that stigma of your generation that frustrates you the most? How you're stereotyped?
That we all need a ribbon.
Ah, yes.
I hate that. So I think that, and really, Krista made this comment earlier today, it's not our fault, it's our parents' fault. They were the ones passing out the ribbons. It was not us. We didn't know.
Good job.
Good job.
So where all are your trophies? Like you have multiple boxes of trophies. Well, I just have one box. You have like 10 boxes, right?
But yeah, but we're still hard workers, and we still work. We earn those ribbons.
I keep a box of trophies in my office for when Jackie comes to see me because she needs one.
She needs that finish line.
That's right. Oh, that's true. I have medals.
Lynette, Kristen, do you have anything else to add?
I'll just piggyback off what Chris said earlier, that we're lazy and don't want to work. I think that kind of started because it was a generation before us. As Steve said, it was all of manufacturing, bam, 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 you have to do this. But as technology came along, things shifted, and we picked it up, which I think made us look like maybe we weren't working as hard, because it wasn't as physical, but we still do good things. We still do a lot of hard work. It just looks different than the generation before us.
I would say though, let's be honest, millennials got a bad rap because there was a lot of us. I hate saying us, but there was a lot in our generation who were lazy and relied on the generation before us to take care of us. And I think it's interesting, I know we're going to get into these questions, but to learn from the generation before you, I've given this example before. So I took my daughter to the gym. I played basketball in high school, so I was showing her some moves that I thought were really fantastic. As she's watching me, she's watching her mom play basketball. Not 16-year-old Kristen play basketball, but her mom. And she said, the move's supposed to look like that? And I was like, yeah, just real fast like this. And she's like, that was not fast. Just how it moves through the generations, like we need to rely on the generations that are before us because they have actually been there. And even though it doesn't feel like they know what they're talking about in the moment, they have been there just because you don't see them as an athlete. You know, they were a former athlete and they lived that life. And I think you can see that through business too. That's like that.
Great. All right. Jump down to Generation Z, but we've added one, so we'll have her introduce herself, what grade you're in, and what school you go to.
I'm Calvin Denny. I'm a senior at Union City Junior Senior High School.
Well, welcome. Okay, so what stigma frustrates you the most about your generation, or stereotype?
I think a lot of us can kind of speak on this, but as we become leaders and express what we're about, I think a lot of us do become leaders, but at the same time, when there's something that goes wrong or something that just doesn't go right, we kind of back down from that. I think a lot of people see that, we'll back down or we don't want to take ownership for what happens. And I think a lot of people only see that and they don't see the people that stick through it and push through being a leader and take the honor for whatever comes throughout them. Because I feel like if they think they're a leader, that all the backlash, so to say, kind of comes back on them, and then they're embarrassed or they don't want to be known by that. But I think there are more people in this world that do take on that backlash, so to say, and they do express that and they don't let that hurt their leadership or wanting to be a leader.
Yeah, so I think one of the stereotypes for our generation is that we're constantly glued to our phones, which can be a bad thing, but it can also be a good thing. So a lot of times you'll see people playing games on their phones, but we can also use technology to advance our generation with the news that we have and the resources that we have at our fingertips. We can go out and we can find articles to read about just inspiration and how to be a leader and stuff like that. But it's how people in our generation decide to use that technology, whether it's for good or for bad. We have the option, and I think a lot of us today as kids don't think as our future as much as we should. We're living in the moment, and we just want to enjoy these years of our life while we're young, but we need to get in the mindset of forward thinking and that everything we do today will have an impact on our future as we move ahead.
Yeah, and I kind of agree with the last thing he said, where we're kind of, and this might just be because we're young, but we're kind of in the mindset of thinking that we're invincible and we don't really have to try super hard to keep going. We're oh, whatever happens, it'll be good. It's gonna end up happening. We don't really need to work too hard for it. But there are a lot of us that do work hard for our future and responsibilities and stuff that I feel like they aren't seen as well.
All right, so baby boomers and Generation X, what are we thinking over here?
First, I wish I was thinking like they are when I was their age. Right?
Exactly.
I think for us, most of us, not all of us, most of us think that everybody has to work hard. They talk about it now and then, right? Use technology to your advantage. And as I said earlier, we have to work smarter, not necessarily harder. But I think most people in our generation think they have to work hard because we didn't have the technology when there. I mean, we had to work hard, right? So I think that's for me, that's the biggest stigma that we have.
So this question humors me, and I guess it's because I'm now old enough that I've heard multiple generations talk about the generation that's coming after them and how bad they are, and so it just isn't true. Every generation has strengths and weaknesses. Every generation has good people and bad people. I don't know why it's so cool to criticize the generations coming after you, because as one of you guys said, we're the ones that raised them. So, yeah, exactly. I mean, you're really criticizing yourself. And so, the generation that was born in the 70s, we were the death of the world. I mean, I'm just telling you, I heard it. And then it was the kids born in the 80s, and now it's the 90s, and every generation, for whatever reason, likes to believe that. There's a little speech that came out for the class of '97 by Boz Luhrmann called "Wear Sunscreen," and he talks about how when you're older, you too will believe that politicians were noble and that kids respected their parents. But for whatever reason, you don't believe that, when you're younger. And so it's a fictitious thing. I don't believe every generation, for whatever reason, has the same stigma. And you guys are going to probably thinking about the kids that are out at the daycare right now and here in 10 years, so it's all good.
For me, I kind of look at the generations like music. So if I look back to my parents who were born in 1928, and they had the old school country and the twang and the key hole and all that fun stuff, and then we came along in the 60s and 70s with rock and roll and big hair bands, and our parents said, oh, you're going to die in hell, and oh, you can't listen to them. And what are they saying? Well, then I had children, and they came along with the hip hop and the rap, and I was like, oh my God, what are you listening to? And you're in the car, and you're like, turn that off. And they'd be mad, and they'd be fighting over the radio. And so you look at it as generations, to me, is like that, because you have to stop and understand what they're listening to, what they're getting from it. I really don't know what I got from listening to K.I.S.S and Aerosmith, but it was fun. But you have to look at it that way, that it's just different. It's just different, and you have to understand, and that's part of what they did when they grew up, part of what I did when we grew up. I personally was so thankful we didn't have cell phones when I was growing up. We could hide from our parents forever. Forever. You guys are tracking each other. You don't go to parties. You text ahead who's there. You don't go. You don't get an opportunity to meet new people because you text ahead, and if your best friend's not there, you're not going. Where in my generation, we would just go to a club, or we would go to a party, and you're like, wow, who's all these people? And you met more people, you talked to more people, you experience more things. I think your generation is more guarded, and so you protect yourself and don't want to put yourself out there unless you're comfortable before you get there. So I think that's kind of a thing that could be worked on a little bit.
And Doris reinforces what I just said. She talks about how her parents criticized her because of K.I.S.S and whatnot. Well, what she doesn't remember is that 1920s twang. They had Hank Williams Sr. that sure was leading everybody to hell. I mean, that was and then they had Elvis, and Elvis was shaking his hips, and so her grandparents thought her parents were leading everyone down the wrong path because of the music they were listening to. So it just, every generation, because things change, yeah, you'll see it.
So that's a good segue into our next question. The next question really focuses on asking our panel to kind of reflect on their parents, because we know that some generational changes, the research has shown that the differences relate to the fact that we watch our parents, of course, right? And there's things that we take from them and look at them and says, I don't want to do that when I'm that age, right? So a lot of the reasons they say Generation Xers really were kind of hardworking, starting though to try to balance that when we saw our baby boomers' parents working way too hard, so we wanted some balance, but we were still very driven because we saw our parents lost things in the recession. And so the recession had an impact on my generation, and so that then had an impact as I parented the younger generation for them to say, you know what, I want more work-life balance because I saw my parents working way too hard, maybe they didn't have much time. So with that said, we need to be cognizant of the fact of what we took in for our parents and the decisions we make and how that's impacting the generations. So with that kind of background, We're going to talk about what you remember of your parents, of their work life, and how do you then think their work life was easier or harder than what you have now for work today. So I'll start with you guys, the seasoned.
Well, as I mentioned, my dad started me out working when I was 6, so that's all he did. Right? He always had a side hustle. He worked all day long, pretty much. And so, but that's what I remember of him. And like I said, as I parented my kids, I wanted them to have more balance than what I got from him. And again, and unfortunately, most of my early career, I was probably just as driven as my dad was, and didn't get to spend a whole lot of work-life balance with my kids. But now we're all good.
I think it's important to understand history and to remember that we were raised by children that were raised by children of the Great Depression. And so what I remember with my parents is they lived in fear because that was during the 80s and layoffs were prevalent. They were blue collar, and that's great. Hard work is definite. But hard work in and of itself is not going to get you where you want to go in life. It has to be combined with working smart. I think it's important, though, that we remember that, because this too shall pass. And I say that all the time. The Great Depression passed, but this hypersonic environment we've been in over the course of the last 2 years, this too shall pass. And that's not me living in fear, it's understanding cycles. And so it's important to appreciate the cycles and to see how those were handled, but don't live in fear of that. And so I guess that would be my thoughts of how I was raised, and there was a closed-mindedness and I guess trying not to do it the way they did it, but to stay open-minded would be the things that I learned.
I want to piggyback on something Paul said there, because it's really important when we talk about an experience, right? Even though Paul didn't experience some of the Great Depressions and whatnot, the fear of that. And so for all of you, you have to think about that. Even though you're trying to change a culture or you're trying to do things, people will remember something in their past, right, that you have no idea on that's a trigger for them. And so you just have to be careful when you do that, is that they'll have triggers even though you're trying to make change, right? They still have other triggers and experiences. And if we don't realize that, we're gonna set ourselves up for failure. So.
Yeah, I think back to my parents were born during the Great Depression, and so they were farmers. And then later on in life, my dad started working at the factory because you couldn't really make it in farming. The equipment was getting too expensive, but yet we still farmed. I had 9 brothers and sisters, so getting up before school to milk the cows, coming home from school to bale the hay, riding the school bus for 45 minutes. The kids today won't do that. They'll, hey, Mom, can you drive me to school? I'm not riding the bus for 45 minutes. Some of my fondest memories were playing euchre on the bus for 45 minutes every single day. Water fights, paper wad fights, all the fun things. Of course, we didn't have phones. And there's nothing wrong with phones today. I can't live without mine. I carry it with me all the time. I'm not on TikTok or those types of things, but it's the communication factor. So I feel like sometimes I'm closed off a little bit, but then I have people that push me into other elements of life. My kids, they wanted cell phones, so I didn't buy them one. I couldn't afford one, but I told them if they wanted one, they could purchase one, and they had to pay for it themselves. And they worked all summer, had to pay a whole year in advance to keep that cell phone. And I think they learned from that, and I think that's part of the part that I took from my parents. I didn't get paid to work. I just had to work on the farm. And then when decal came about at 13, and all my siblings went to go decal with corn, and I had a late birthday, so I couldn't work that summer, and I cried because I wanted to work when I was 12. How sad is that? And looking back thinking, wow, I should be a kid today. Who wants to work when you're 12? But you learn from that, so you try to instill those values, in the younger generation, but yet you want to give them more too. So you want to give them that freedom because you say, oh, but you're going to have to work the rest of your life, so don't work too hard. Or my parents would be like, work real hard. And I'm like, okay, just work semi-hard. And now this generation's like, don't work at all till you're out of college. So it's just learning. It's just learning, finding that balance, I guess is where I'm going with that.
Okay. All right, so we're due here with the millennials. So what do you think are, maybe if you reflect on what's easier or harder in your workplace today than what your parents had?
Well, in my mind, I was thinking as they were talking, my parents both had big career changes when I was growing up, and I actually had this conversation this week with my dad. They never missed any of our events, and my mom worked nights as a nurse, and so I'm not exactly sure how they managed that. But now as an adult, I can see that balancing game that they were playing, and I'm more grateful now. And then I'm like feeling like convicted, like hearing you guys talk too. When I say to my kids, I just want you to be like so grateful for, not that I want them to shower me with praise or give me a ribbon, I don't do that. But, you know, it took me until I was 20 years removed from the situation to feel the extreme gratefulness. And so I think like they dealt with a lot of challenges that we don't realize. And you guys don't realize the challenges your parents are dealing with because you're not living it. They shelter you from certain things. And so I think that, you know, that flows through all generations of things that we deal with.
Good point.
I would say I feel like they worked harder because of, we just have, I don't know, they just work different. Because we have so much technology now that I think makes certain things that were hard then easier now, but yet that adds a whole nother element of hard. So you have to have that balance, right, that you're not glued to your phone and you actually look up and have those face-to-face conversations. I don't think that was an issue for them. So yeah, but I just feel like they worked a different kind of hard for my parents.
One thing I really have taken from my parents is the importance of family, because they both had to work so hard, and a lot of times we didn't have a lot, but we always had each other. So like looking back now, I think, oh wow, we were really had hard times sometimes. I didn't realize it as a kid because they like just kept us together and we were always together. But one thing that I still see, like my mom struggle with this too, is like technology. Like, if a text is like more than 5 words, I have to like type it for her, send it to, like, you know, she just struggles. And so my dad's a pastor, and I remember like growing up, if we had to cancel church or some big event was coming, he had to start like the party line. He'd be like, so-and-so calls so-and-so, and then someone doesn't find out about it, and then they're upset. And now I'm like, Dad, like just get on like the WhatsApp app or just text it all out in mass text or put it on Facebook. And so they still struggle with that, and I've been able to help them with that. Is the communication is just easier, just put it out there instead of having to call everybody, because then you know you have that one person that talks for 30 minutes on the phone and then 3 hours later no one knows what's going on. So I just think just using technology for your advantage to communicate.
All right, Generation Z.
So, I think that it can be said that our parents like have to work harder than us. But if you think about it, we're just now entering the workforce. So a lot of our generation only really have like the first job experience of like working at a fast food restaurant or having like an internship or something. But if you take a look at the school workload that we have now, which isn't the same as having a job, but it is very similar, as like there is a lot expected from our students now than there was when our parents were in school. I know like this one time I was writing a paper and I was researching for it, and my dad thought it was really cool, so he wanted to like take a look at some of my resources, and he told me he said that he was so shocked at like I had to find primary and secondary sources and stuff, and he was like, when I wrote papers I just found random websites and used them, and he was blown away by the amount of academic research we had to find. And I think it's schoolwork wise we have it a little harder.
Yeah, to piggyback off that to start with, the skills that we learn in school now, I feel like are more advanced than the older generations would have learned. But on top of that, I think technology has helped us to make that stuff easier. So although the work today might be more advanced than it was years ago, the technology has helped to make that simpler. So overall, the change isn't as much. But for me, I grew up on a family farm in which I've seen technology and equipment change over the years. So genetics has helped like the acreage and the bushels per acre to grow significantly. But with that, the equipment that does so helps you to get that down and the runtime for everything down. So I think allowing us to advance technology and move everything forward has overall made stuff easier for our generation so that we don't have like the same issues that she would have been talking about with prices of equipment and that holding us back. So we have those things moving forward to help make life easier and more simplistic for us.
So both of my parents started off working when they were like you guys, teenagers, and my dad started working on the farm when he was 7. So they both understand what it is like to have a job and balance, like they said, school. They know what it's like to go through basically their whole entire life working. My mom went through being a paraprofessional, and then she also went through doing that and going to college. So they both have definitely experienced a lot of hard work, but I think because they experienced that, they know how it felt. And so for me growing up, it was always like you live and you learn type thing. So they didn't really like shelter me and tell me that I didn't have to do something, but they made it to where I could make my own decisions, and if it didn't go right, then you learn from it, and if it did go right, then it did go right. And so I think kind of what their philosophy for basically parenting me was, we don't want you to have to go through so much hardship right now. We want you to enjoy life and be a kid, because when you do get older, you will work, you will go to college, you will do that stuff, and then that will go on to your own kids. So you'll do the same for your kids. So it's kind of like with my family, it's like a piggyback, because they did that for me, but they know that I'm going to do that for my kids. So it's kind of different just because I don't have a job, and I probably won't have a job until college or afterwards. But my parents kind of planned ahead for that, and they knew that when they were growing up that that's what they wanted to do for their kids, so that they didn't have to worry about the stress of that, I would say.
Wonderful.
I think Lynette hit on something there that really explains everything. She talks about how easy it is to communicate in today's society. And my challenge to that would be, so when we were growing up, you had a phone, and that was how you communicated other than face to face. So while it may be easier to communicate, it is so hard in today's society to communicate, because you have a phone, you have emails, you have Facebook Messenger, you have all of these different platforms, and it's hard to keep up with that. And so I think there's pros and cons to everything. Some things make it easier, but it also makes it more challenging, and to get effective communication through all those different platforms. And so sometimes it's quality, not quantity. So.
Well, at this time, we want to take a break and ask questions from our audience. Is there any questions that you have in regards to generations or anything that's been said? Anything that's just percolating?
Yeah, I got a question.
Yep.
So to the senior generation, so you're saying that the younger generation is poor, right? My question is, how are you engaging with them? Because that is where they're asking for. You're getting them to leave your organization, but how are you engaging them? And not just saying, here, go fix this product, right? Go fix this machine, but how are you actually engaging them to keep them?
I'll open with that. Being in human resources, we deal a lot with conflict resolution. I have a great group of managers who handle a lot of that before it even gets to human resources. Again, they've all been at Frank Miller longer than I have, more than 20 years. But I think the most important part for me is the willingness to understand the other person. No matter who it is, no matter what your age, no matter what the problem is, everybody wants to feel important. So when you're sitting across the table from somebody, body language tells a lot, and it takes a lot for people to open up. So they might come to you, you know, with an issue or a problem or a joy or a happiness, whatever it might be. I think listening first with your head and your heart, and understanding that person, no matter what the generation, no matter what the age, no matter what the race, the sex, whatever it is, understand what they're trying to get from you. And once you get that, you can get them to kind of relax and kind of draw out what really is wrong and how you can help them. So I think the willingness to understand others is important.
I think it's a great question, Daniel, and I guess for me, how do you engage them? And sometimes this is not always liked by the people I'm leading, but I don't tell people what to do. I ask them, how do you do it? And I challenge them to find the answer. And sometimes people want to be told what to do, but that's easier today, but it doesn't benefit you in the future. And so I think it's important to not tell anyone what to do, but ask them, how do you do it? And ask the questions that lead into the answer.
Yeah, obviously, Doris talked about that for us at Franklin, and I believe wholeheartedly it's the reason why we have a full staff today, is because we are for the people, right? We're for the employee. They say that you can't lead them unless they know that you care for them. And we care about the folks, Doris, that'll be her legacy at Franklin, is that we make sure that when they come in the door, and again, we've changed the philosophy there over the last 7 years, when they come in the door, it is our responsibility to coach them, not to do it for them, to coach them. I got some Franklin other folks out there. We coach them, right? Again, we don't tell them what to do. We tell them how to do it. We coach them as much as we can, understanding we still have an operation to run. Well, we're coaching our folks, right? We're coaching the young people. I mean, we have a lot of young people on our staff there that I spend quality time with most of them to make sure that they understand and we care for them. So that's the biggest difference that we have there, is we have to care for them and then mentor them, right? It's our job to mentor them to be better, because they all want to have value. They want to have value and they want to be appreciated. It's that simple. At the end of the day, it's that simple. And how do you communicate? As Paul said, how we communicate. And again, sometimes it's not from our vantage point, it's from theirs. Because if we tell them to do good job, they don't want to hear good job, right? They want something different. We have to know individually who that is, how they respond, and it's not carte blanche all through the whole organization. So again, but we care about the employee. That's how we do it at Franklin.
Yes, I think what you're capturing there, and I think, Daniel, what they're finding is it really is just about the relationship, right? Because that's really the difference between leadership and management, right? So management's just about the technical side, right? This is what you're going to do, this is how we're going to do it, this is how we're going to try to keep you, this is how we're going to teach you to fix that machine. But leadership is that step of saying, well, we know the most important thing to keep you in our company is to value you as a person, to build that relationship, and to help you develop of what you need to do. And that's what's going to keep you. That's what's going to keep, regardless of the generation, because we all want those relationships. We all want to be valued and respected in our role. And so, that's really kind of what they're finding is helping in this craziness of this labor shortage and everybody bouncing around like ping pongs. Is what they're finding. So anybody else have any other questions? Yes, ma'am.
I'm going to focus it on these leaders here.
Love
As
it.
leaders in our school, and those of you that are getting ready to go out to the workforce, we are always looking for things that we can provide you to be enticed to come to our workplaces and to stay there, because you are a generation that likes to stay active. What are you looking for in an employer as you are getting into the workforce that you feel like will bring you to that workforce and want you to stay from your generation specifically?
I think a lot of our generation is, what first brings you to someone is the paycheck. So we constantly think about finances and how we're going to live our life and make sure that we're making by with what we make. So that's the first thing that brings us to someone, but what makes us stay is the environment that we're in. So once we're there, we want to be able to feel like we're treated right and that the people there know us and care for us. So I think once we're there, we need to have that feeling of involvement and acceptance in order for us to stay there and want to be in that environment.
Yeah, I personally, obviously I want a job that is actually exciting to me, so it's a little bit not just the employer, but I do agree it's I want to be sure that I am working for someone who I can trust will have my back and support me and accept me and even be a little lenient on the last minute plans that come up, because you know there's a lot of those with our generation of just a lot of things all the time. So yeah.
Yeah, I agree with both of them. I think that the job's got to be fun, because obviously you don't want to do a job if it's not fun to you. You don't want to be bored, so to say. But at the same time, I think a big one for me is community, because I want to be involved with people who are involved with me and who care for me too. And I think when you have a good community, I would be more apt to stay, because I know that other people are there for me and they care for me, and I can trust them and they can also trust me. So.
That's wonderful. That's a wonderful question. That was a great question. Thank you. Anybody else? Yes.
It's more of a thought than necessarily a question, and I'm a millennial, so I'm targeting this table. I know as a millennial leader in my company, I've had to watch things change a lot in the workplace, not just with our generations, but with the way we do things and we treat employees and even myself. When I entered the workforce in high school, I was a number, right? I'm just a number, I'm a body, I'm here to fill a position, and we are changing that. The workplace isn't the same anymore. So as a leader in my generation, how do you bridge that gap from people who have been in the workforce for 20 years to the new people? And you know, we care about the person. We need them to be engaged at work. We need them to feel like they're meaningful in the workplace and we care about them. How are we to bridge that gap between the generations and as one person appeal to all of those things? Because I'm sure you guys have that too.
So, jumped right in. Go for it. Okay. So I do everything through a marketing filter, so it's interesting to hear both tables talk. So a lot of people think of external marketing, right? So we want to get our name out there, make sure we have a good brand awareness, all the things, right? But internal marketing is super important, because what we're saying is that we have people in our organizations who are doing more work. And so you can probably go through every industry that's sitting in here and everybody's doing more work. I think when you're connected to a company, Frank Miller talks about it, Charter Realty does it too, when you feel connected to the company and you feel appreciated. So how do you do that is what you're asking. There's a book called The 5 Love Languages, but it also talks how you receive encouragement. And so knowing what everybody's different ways to receive encouragement, is it a pat on the back? Is it an email? Like, because that's how they want to communicate, right? Is it a goodie bag with chocolates in it? Like, it could be silly things, or it could be all the things. And I think focusing on internal marketing is important, because if I feel appreciated and I feel like I'm part of the team, then I'm willing to go the extra mile. I mean, I know I said athletics earlier, but if you feel connected to your team and your coach says, I need you to go in there for the last 30 seconds and give it your all, you're gonna do it, because you're looking for the good of the team to get the victory, which is what we want in our organizations on any level. So I think as a leader, looking at what can we do across the board to not just view employees as a number, but to let them know that we're engaged and listening, active listening. Doris talks about this all the time. She's an active listener, and I think it's super important.
Yeah, so what I thought of when you were making your comment, I think, so my mom and dad owned a business in the community, and I saw my dad, which I love my dad, so no disrespect to my father. He gave me a lot of ribbons. But I saw my dad be a boss. And so what I think I've had the opportunity to witness is that people don't look for bosses anymore, they look for leaders. Mm-hmm. And exactly what Kristen just said, I think the key thing to that is listening. You just listen, and you listen to understand and not to respond. Mm-hmm. So, and again, I believe that that's just what builds that relationship. And it's interesting to just watch how, I mean, old school to me was, like my dad probably has even said, I pay them, I tell them what to do, and then they do it. And that does not fly anymore. that's not working. So yeah, you gotta listen and build that relationship. So that's what I've seen.
One thing that we've really done at RCU is we've taken personality tests and we've studied them as a team. And that has really changed the way that we communicate with each other, because I know like how she's gonna respond to something because I've learned about her personality. And so she knows how to come at me and how to come at her, because otherwise sometimes we get stuck in our own bubble and we think that, oh, this is how I would approach the situation, but you may be like completely turning that person off because that's just not how they communicate. So I think if you as a company invest in your employees and you understand them and you know how they want to be communicated with, you understand what's important to them, you understand, like, especially if you have to do some type of discipline or something with them, if you understand how you have to come about that, you can be constructive about that instead of just tearing them down. Because sometimes, like, you think that you know one thing, but you don't know until you know, as Steve always tells me. You don't know until you know. So you have to explore that, and I think the companies that I've seen really invest in their employees and understand them as people, one-on-one, those are the companies that are really succeeding because they understand what the people need. So like for me, like it's super important, like because I have kids right now that have health problems. So if my son's in the hospital, Jackie, when I come in next month, Jackie's like, hey, how's he doing? Like that means a lot to me because that meant that she thought about that. Because I always feel bad if I have to miss work. So then I'm carrying myself down because I'm trying to balance my family and my job. And so when I come in and they're like, hey, how's he doing? That makes me feel like, okay, they weren't mad at me because I wasn't here yet. So I mean, there's just like little things like that because you don't know what people are really thinking until you get to know them better.
Yeah, the other thing with that, with the like personality stuff, I mean, it's not, it helps you to understand the other person's perspective, but it also gives you an awareness about yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I mean, yeah, I can, yeah, I be direct, right? And so I'm aware of that. And I have a million ideas in a minute, and I'm sometimes going to verbally vomit all over you. And, but I know that, and some people are going to be like, whoa. Like, so yeah, so just awareness.
You know, to piggyback on what they were saying, you know, the thing to look at from an employer's perspective, it's all about fit, right? And so you have to have what your culture is, what your core values are, and you have to express them to the people, right? Because you don't know what you don't know, and they don't know what to expect if you're not telling them what to expect. And so for us, again, it's very much so that we look for fit, right? Because we can train pretty much anything, and we look for fit. And how are you going to fit? Because you know the reason that the RCU is doing well is that they all fit together, right? They can piggyback off of each other. They all have their strengths and their weaknesses, and they see that. And the same thing at Frank Miller, you know. We all don't have to be Mr. Everything or Miss Everything there, is that we have a team around us. And I think that's really the key for anybody, is that you rely on that team to make you better. And all of a sudden, it's amazing how that will bubble up, right? And it's talking about that. Treat them as individuals, because at the end of the day, I know that my staff will do anything in the world for me because of the respect that we have for each other.
Katie?
Okay, I know we're pushing it on time, so you're going to have to answer this one quickly. There's one more generation that's not in this room that we have coming to us in the future. So our students who are in elementary school right now, what opportunity do we have to nurture them to be prepared for the workforce ahead?
I can answer.
Well, really bold. I shouldn't give it like that. I had the opportunity. Did anyone else go to the State of the Schools that RCU did? I know the superintendents did. I feel like our schools are doing an amazing job of, when I went to school, there was one way to go to school and everybody was supposed to go to college, right? So that was the mentality, and now that is not the mentality. And hearing about Union City's media program and all the other things that they have going on was fantastic to hear about, because I probably would have been interested in communications if I'd gone that route. And being part of the Winchester School Program, we're offering programs to students that are offered in big communities. And I think that it's important to take a look at that, see how you can be involved. Like, that's part of my job, is to gain community involvement. So there you go, there's my plug for that. But I think take a look at how you can be involved in your schools, in your area, because just like Katie said, that next generation is coming. Went to a training this week and we learned we're preparing students for jobs that don't exist yet. And so knowing that ahead of time, like as the leaders and wanting our community to succeed, it's important to invest that.
That's a great point. We're preparing them. We're preparing the kids for jobs that don't exist yet, and to understand that our entire education system was built after World War II to train kids to be production workers because that was what we needed. Well, it was a great idea back then, but it's antiquated. And so now we have to be forward-looking. And so that's important. And I think being engaged and open-minded with our youth, and I think that's the thing we as a community are starting to realize is how important it is to start to bridge the gap and get us old people involved with the kids. And we learn as much or more from them as they do from us, and to stay open-minded to that.
Yeah, you know, to your point there, obviously what we're doing here in Randolph County, obviously Kristen talked about the P-TECH program that we have in Winchester. Union City is looking at another way to transform how they're doing their education there to really help and more diversify and to get that out there. I know that Katie and her group there are looking at these trailers that we're doing, and again, Frank Miller is part of that as well. But again, it is the employers need to be into the schools, and I think I told some, I had the opportunity last year to talk to some elementary kids and then some high schoolers and whatnot. And again, and we get to do the next gen with all the leaders of the different school systems, and they're really, really impressive. But you know what was more impressive? Is the elementary kids that I was talking to, right? They are engaged. They want to know. And we have to be able to explain to them, like at Frank Miller Lumber, we're not just piling lumber, right? We actually have accounting jobs and HR jobs and all that stuff. And we have lots of jobs in our county that the kids don't even have any idea that we have these jobs. And so we can't have industry specific because you have one of these industries, right? We have all that within our community here. And we have to go out there and educate these kids and again, have them explore the different careers that are possible, because there's probably everybody in this room don't know all the positions that's available in Randolph County, right here locally. We don't have to send our kids someplace else to have a good job and a good living. We have all those abilities right here in Randolph County. So I'm excited about the future and how we're going to get to these kids. Because I think we're on the right track. We're doing a lot of great things here.
Does anybody else on the panel have a comment for Katie's question about how to help our younger?
I think for our generation, we're so close in age to those younger generations that are in elementary that our job really is to just be mentors to them and work with them. So a lot of us could have siblings in that generation, so it's our job to be that older brother or older sister to help guide them along the way, make sure like they're on the right path to success so that they have a plan for the future and they know where they're going ahead of them.
And Katie, I'm sure you know this, but one of the things that I've been hearing is critical thinking is a concern, to give, because we're so right now in this generation, my kids were about passing the test, the iReads, the iSteps, the SATs, ACTs, and there are like 15 million other tests that the schools have to administer. And so our kids are just learning to pass the test and not thinking critically, which is really going to harm our workforce. So I think that's one thing that we need to be mindful of how we can do that. So, we're kind of wrapping up time. I can take one more question. If there's any more questions, I've got 3 questions. So now I have to lie, and now I'm going to take all 3 because I want everybody to get a ribbon. So everybody's going to get to participate. Okay.
I think Maxwell doesn't start till like 9:15, so we have some time.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay, this question is for the more experienced people. So I was wondering if you could give one piece of advice for like the generation like Gen Z who's like now going into the workforce, what would that be?
Show up on time. Yep. It's the simple things. Be respectful. Work hard. Stay open-minded. Never, ever quit learning. Ever. It doesn't end when you get out of high school or college. Stay open-minded and continue to educate yourself.
And they talked about it down the right. Do what you're passionate about, right? Don't just go take a job because you won't be happy. The employer won't be happy. Do what makes you happy and what, right? And knowing that you're going to have phases, right? What makes you happy today doesn't necessarily going to make you happy in 20 years or whatnot. But go do what makes you happy because we see it there. We see that people are unhappy. They're not doing themselves any favor. They're not really doing us a favor there. So just do what makes you happy, right?
And if you don't know what you want to do and you start a job at a company, always be open-minded, seek to understand all the positions there. When you're given an opportunity to do something or try something, try it. because you don't really know what you like until you've done it. So there are people that maybe I want to be a computer analyst or I want to be an IT person. But then they get in there and they're like, wow, this is not what I thought it was. Don't be afraid to try something, if you like the company, to try something else within the company, because you might become well-rounded, you might become a person that knows a little bit about everything in the company, and therefore you have opportunity to move up. So don't ever turn down a promotion either. A promotion's not there, I'm not there forever. That could just be a stepping stone to get to somewhere else.
Okay, we had 2 other questions, yes.
I just wanted your opinion on if you think with the Great Resignation, if people are leaving for culture or money, because I know a lot of people are throwing money out there right now, but I think culture is also the main factor. I didn't know what your experience was, culture or money right now.
I think it's important. I've had some different work experiences. If you say that your culture is one thing, so if you're a school district and you say at the head office that this is the culture and it doesn't trickle down to all buildings, that's important. Or if you know that you're part of a big company and they say that this is the core value, this is our mission, this is our vision, and it doesn't trickle down, it makes employees resentful when they sit on conference calls and they hear about the great culture of the company and how the corporate office is taking a coffee cart around on Fridays, and you're like, we don't even have a coffee maker. Like there has to be a trickle down. Like if your company stands for something, it has to trickle down into all parts, which means that managers have to help implement that and be responsible. But yeah, I think money's a big deal, but I think that you're seeing a lot of people leave because of the culture and willing to take a pay cut because of it.
I think Elijah said it best, right? They're there for the money, right? But they're going to stay for the culture. And they're also going to leave because of the culture. As we tell everybody, they are not leaving the company. They are leaving their direct manager. And if you have people leaving, you better find out why they're leaving. Again, if they're leaving to take better jobs, right, more opportunities, that's fantastic. But if they're leaving just to leave, it's to send a message to your company that there's a cultural problem. And I still think it's cultural, right? Because it's interesting. There's a lot of companies out there showcasing a whole lot of money. I mean, I know Walmart's trying to get drivers for $100,000 or whatever. Be leery of that because the money's great, but the culture must be not so great because they're having trouble filling the spot. So, and nothing against Walmart. That was an example, and how they're trying to get truck drivers, right?
I think it's multifaceted. I mean, you can't pay people twice as much as industry standards and have a bad culture. They'll still leave. But you can't pay them half as much as industry standards and have a great culture. They'll still leave. So it's both. And the other thing is what's important to one person may not be important to the other. And so, as Doris has kept talking about, and it's the 7 habits of highly effective people, is seek first to understand and then to be understood. Find out what is important to each individual, and don't paint a broad stroke because everybody has their own level of importance on what's important.
I agree with Paul, you have to have a balance because if I can't pay my bills, even if I love a company, I'm not going to be able to stay there.
Exactly.
But you could also pay me a ton of money, but if I'm miserable going to work every day, that's not going to be worth it in the end either.
Yep.
So I think you, as a company, you really got to balance that. You got to keep your people happy and invest in them, but you also need to pay them a fair wage.
Because we have one more question, yep, in the back. Yes, sir.
When the power goes out and the computers break down, the pen and paper still work. Learning the hard way first, so when the easy way fails, is a philosophy that I've always had. However, I often run into resistance in learning the hard way first. I'm interested to know how resonant or dissonant that philosophy of leading and learning is to each of the generations on the panel.
Okay, so the difference between leading and learning is kind of what you're...
No, the agreement or disagreement with it's best to learn the hard way first before you try the easy way.
Okay.
So we have a manual backup process. Just anybody knows that if our technology breaks down. And again, but to your point, I know that we have a lot of resistance, no matter what generation we're in, if we have to go back in a hard way. But so for us, we plan that, right? And we educated our folks on it. We know how to do it if we have to. So I guess, and for us, we like to have all our kind of the backup plans in place. So for us, we have that backup plan the hard way. No one wants to do it, but it's there.
I think it's just a normal human nature thing to seek easy. And age and wisdom teach you that if you do what's hard, life will be easy. If you do what's easy, life will be hard. But the percentage of people that figure that out probably hasn't changed for all mankind. And so I think that's just a simple human nature question.
Anybody else?
I think I disagree with that statement because I think it's better to work easier and more efficiently than work harder and waste your time taking a week doing something that could take a day if you do it a more efficient or easier way. And sure, there is the thought of, well, what if this fails? What are you going to do? Well, then you learn how to do it a different way. I know our generation is really good at adapting and learning new things. So I don't see the problem in taking the easy way out if it means that more things can get done easier and quicker and better.
Yeah, I think our generation has like a cross that bridge when we get there mentality. So we've grown up with technology from the day that we came to this earth, and we have the idea that when that technology is there, we're going to make use of it because it makes things easier. So like he said, the paper and pencil, when all things fail, we don't think of that until it actually occurs. So we don't think ahead to that part in our lives. We're going to worry about that when that time comes, because as of right now, we don't think it'll ever happen, even though it's very possible at any moment.
Anybody else? All right, well, how are we on time? We are right there. So we just want to say thank you. I think the one thing that you have learned from this panel is the fact that, yes, it is a challenge having different generations. We're all different. We're all unique, but we're also all similar. Because the key thing I think you heard, that if you want to cross the generational gap, it's one thing, relationships, right? It really is not rocket science on how to bridge the generational gaps in your companies. So enjoy your day, and thank you for coming.
Big round of applause for the panel.
Yep.
Thank you. Here tomorrow.
So I think you can get some food, right?